Picture this. Somewhere in the world right now, a mother is watching her children make choices that break her heart. But this isn't just any mother. This is the woman who said yes to the impossible, who stood beneath a cross watching love itself die, who continues to intercede for humanity with the tenderness only a mother can possess. How do we know that our daily choices reach the heart of Mary? Because there lived a man who saw beyond the ordinary world. Francesco Forgione, known to us as Padre Pio, didn't just believe in the spiritual realm, he inhabited it. For 50 years, he carried the wounds of Christ in his own flesh. Through mystical visions, he witnessed realities that most of us can only glimpse through faith. But among all his extraordinary experiences, perhaps the most profound were his encounters with our Blessed Mother. Padre Pio didn't simply honor Mary from a distance. He conversed with her, received revelations from her, and was granted the privilege of understanding how our human choices create ripples in her maternal heart. Today is June 28th, the feast of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. On this sacred day, we're going to explore something that might change how you see your relationship with our Heavenly Mother forever. Through Padre Pio's mystical insights, we'll discover 5 specific patterns of behavior that create what he called spiritual disconnections from Mary's heart. These aren't abstract theological concepts. They're real, everyday attitudes that millions engage in without realizing their profound impact on the mother who loves them beyond measure. Some of these might surprise you, others might challenge you, but all of them offer us a pathway to deeper intimacy with the woman who can guide us most surely to her Son. If you've ever sensed Mary's presence in your life, if you've felt her gentle guidance during difficult moments, write in the comments, "Mary, help me love you better." This simple acknowledgement opens your heart to receive what we're about to share. Here's what I promise you. By the end of this video, you'll understand not just what wounds Mary's heart, but more importantly, how your life can become a source of joy and consolation for our Heavenly Mother. The 5th insight we'll share might be the key to transforming your entire spiritual journey. But first, we need to understand who Padre Pio was and why his insights carry such profound authority. To grasp the weight of Padre Pio's revelations about Mary's heart, we must first understand the extraordinary nature of his spiritual gifts. Born Francesco Forgione in 1887, he entered religious life as a young man, but it soon became clear that God had chosen him for something unprecedented in modern church history. In 1918, while praying before a crucifix, Padre Pio received the stigmata, the 5 wounds of Christ appearing in his own flesh. But this was merely the most visible sign of his mystical gifts. He possessed the ability to read hearts, to appear in 2 places simultaneously, and to witness spiritual realities hidden from ordinary perception. Among his most treasured experiences were his encounters with the Blessed Virgin Mary. Unlike the dramatic apparitions recorded at Fatima or Lourdes, Padre Pio's relationship with Mary was intimate and ongoing. She appeared to him not as a distant figure delivering messages for the world, but as a loving mother offering guidance, consolation, and profound insights into the spiritual life. In his letters and conversations with spiritual directors, Padre Pio described how Mary would show him the state of souls, the effects of prayer, and the mysterious connections between earthly actions and heavenly realities. It was through these revelations that he began to understand how human choices create what he called spiritual weather patterns around Mary's maternal heart. One of his most significant insights came during a particularly profound mystical experience in 1947. Mary showed him how every soul is connected to her heart through invisible threads of love, and how certain attitudes and behaviors either strengthen or strain these connections. "My son," she told him. "I want you to understand that a mother's heart feels everything her children experience, but it also feels what they choose to ignore or reject." This revelation transformed Padre Pio's understanding of sin and virtue. He began to see moral choices not simply as actions that please or displease God, but as decisions that either nourish or neglect our relationship with our Heavenly Mother. Mary's heart, he understood, was like a spiritual barometer, responding to the atmospheric pressure of human love or indifference. What makes Padre Pio's insights particularly valuable is their pastoral nature. He wasn't receiving abstract theological information, but practical wisdom about how to live in closer communion with Mary. The patterns he identified weren't meant to burden souls with guilt, but to illuminate pathways toward deeper spiritual intimacy. As we explore these 5 patterns, remember that Padre Pio shared them not to condemn, but to heal. Each insight he received was accompanied by Mary's infinite mercy and her eager desire to draw her children closer to her Immaculate Heart. The first pattern that distances us from Mary's heart might surprise you because it's so common we barely notice it. Padre Pio called it spiritual orphanism, the tendency to live as if we have no heavenly family, as if we're navigating life's challenges completely on our own. This isn't the angry rebellion of someone who rejects God. It's subtler and perhaps more heartbreaking for a mother's heart. It's the spiritual equivalent of a child who simply forgets to call home, who faces every crisis without reaching out to family, who makes major life decisions in complete isolation. During one of his mystical conversations with Mary, Padre Pio asked her what caused her the most persistent sorrow. Her response was illuminating. "My son, I watch millions of my children live as orphans when they could be living as beloved family members. They struggle alone when they could ask for help. They face darkness when they could walk in the light of constant companionship." Think about your own spiritual life for a moment. How often do you make decisions without any reference to your heavenly family? How frequently do you face challenges without turning to Mary for her maternal guidance? When you experience joy or success, do you share these moments with the mother who rejoices in your happiness? Spiritual orphanism manifests in countless ways. The person who prays only during emergencies, the individual who seeks advice from everyone except the mother of good counsel, the soul who feels alone in their struggles despite having access to the most powerful intercessor in heaven. What makes this pattern particularly poignant is that it's easily healed. Mary doesn't require grand gestures or dramatic conversions. She simply wants to be remembered, acknowledged, included in the daily rhythm of our lives. A simple "Good morning, Mother" can begin to repair years of spiritual orphanism. Padre Pio taught that the antidote to this pattern was remarkably simple: habitual awareness of Mary's presence. He encouraged people to develop what he called conversational prayer with Mary, not formal petitions, but the natural communication that occurs between family members who genuinely care about each other. But this first pattern, while common, is relatively easy to address once we recognize it. The second pattern we need to examine goes deeper, touching the very foundation of how we understand human dignity and love. The second pattern that grieves Mary's maternal heart involves how we treat the sacred gift of human sexuality and the dignity of the human person. But before you assume this is a lecture about moral rules, let me share how Padre Pio understood this issue through his mystical insights. During one of his visions, Mary showed Padre Pio 2 different scenes. In the first, he saw human love expressed with reverence, commitment, and genuine care for the beloved's well-being. The joy radiating from Mary's heart in response to this scene was overwhelming. In the second scene, he witnessed sexuality divorced from love, dignity sacrificed for pleasure, and the human person treated as an object of consumption rather than a temple of the Holy Spirit. The contrast in Mary's response was stark, not because she was judgmental, but because she was maternal. "When my children wound themselves," she explained to Padre Pio, "I feel every injury as if it were my own." This revelation helped Padre Pio understand that impurity isn't primarily about breaking rules. It's about self-inflicted wounds that a loving mother watches helplessly. Every time we engage with sexuality in ways that diminish rather than honor human dignity, we're essentially hurting ourselves while our mother watches. In our current cultural moment, this pattern has reached epidemic proportions. The availability of explicit content, the normalization of casual intimacy, and the treatment of human sexuality as entertainment rather than sacred gift creates what Padre Pio called spiritual static that interferes with our ability to hear Mary's gentle voice. But here's what makes Mary's response to this pattern so beautiful. Her primary concern isn't punishment, but healing. Padre Pio witnessed how Mary intercedes constantly for those caught in these patterns, how she provides grace for conversion, and how she celebrates every small step toward restoration of dignity. The path forward isn't shame, but reverence. Padre Pio taught that the most powerful weapon against impurity was developing a deep appreciation for the human person as God's masterpiece. When we truly understand our own dignity and the dignity of others, choices that honor that dignity become natural and joyful. As we continue to explore these patterns, remember that Mary's heart responds to our struggles with infinite compassion. She's not keeping score of our failures, she's providing strength for our healing. As we explore these profound insights from Padre Pio, many of you have been asking how you can deepen your understanding of his teachings and develop a more intimate relationship with Mary's Immaculate Heart. That's why we've created The Spiritual Secrets of St. Padre Pio, a comprehensive guide containing the prayers, practices, and wisdom that Padre Pio used to console Mary's heart and grow in mystical intimacy with God. You'll discover his personal methods for overcoming spiritual obstacles, his most powerful prayers of reparation, and practical steps for becoming a source of joy rather than sorrow for our Heavenly Mother. This resource has already transformed countless spiritual lives, offering the kind of authentic, tested wisdom that can only come from someone who lived so close to heaven. You'll find the link to this special guide in our pinned comment below. Now let's continue with the third pattern that affects Mary's heart, one that might be closer to home than you think. The third pattern that creates distance from Mary's heart is what Padre Pio called casual irreverence, the gradual erosion of our sense of the sacred through careless words, attitudes, and choices. This isn't about dramatic acts of blasphemy or conscious rebellion against God. It's more subtle and perhaps more dangerous because it happens so gradually we don't notice it. It's the casual use of God's name as an exclamation, the irreverent jokes about faith, the treatment of sacred things as ordinary or commonplace. Padre Pio's understanding of this pattern came through a particularly moving vision, where he saw Mary weeping, not tears of anger, but tears of sadness. When he asked her why, she explained, "My children are losing their capacity to recognize beauty, truth, and goodness because they've allowed the sacred to become commonplace in their hearts." In our media-saturated culture, we're constantly exposed to content that mocks what is holy, trivializes what is profound, and treats the extraordinary gift of existence as routine and unremarkable. Each time we participate in this casual irreverence, we dim our spiritual sensitivity a little more. The tragedy isn't that God is offended by our irreverence. God's love is too secure to be threatened by human carelessness. The tragedy is that we gradually lose our ability to experience the wonder, gratitude, and joy that come from recognizing the sacred dimensions of ordinary life. Mary's heart grieves this pattern because she knows what we're missing. She lived every moment in awareness of God's presence, found the sacred in the ordinary, and maintained a heart of reverent wonder even in the midst of profound suffering. The healing for casual irreverence isn't religious perfectionism, but intentional reverence. Padre Pio taught simple practices, pausing before we speak to consider whether our words honor or dishonor the sacred, choosing entertainment that elevates rather than degrades our spiritual sensitivity, and cultivating gratitude for the extraordinary gift of existence itself. But as challenging as casual irreverence can be, the fourth pattern presents an even greater obstacle to intimacy with Mary's heart. The fourth pattern that creates profound distance from Mary's maternal heart is one that often masquerades as spiritual maturity. The belief that we can maintain our relationship with God without the means of grace He has provided for us. This pattern particularly grieved Padre Pio because he spent so many hours each day administering the very sacraments that people were choosing to abandon. He would sometimes spend 12 to 14 hours in the confessional, fully aware that for every person who came seeking God's mercy, countless others were attempting to manage their spiritual lives through willpower and good intentions alone. In one of his most profound mystical experiences, Padre Pio witnessed Mary standing at the foot of every altar where Mass is celebrated throughout the world. She wasn't there as a distant observer, but as an active participant in each Eucharistic sacrifice, reliving the offering of her Son for the salvation of souls. The joy on her face when people approached the altar with faith and reverence was indescribable, but her sorrow when people chose to stay away was equally intense. "How can I not grieve," she told Padre Pio, "when my children choose to starve spiritually while the bread of life is freely offered? How can my heart not break when they seek forgiveness everywhere except in the place where my Son's mercy flows most abundantly?" This pattern is particularly dangerous because it often develops gradually and can even feel spiritually mature. People convince themselves that they can pray at home instead of attending Mass, that they can confess their sins directly to God without the sacrament of reconciliation, that they can maintain their spiritual life through private devotion alone. But Padre Pio understood something profound about spiritual self-sufficiency. It's not actually self-sufficient. When we cut ourselves off from the sacraments, we begin to rely more heavily on our own strength, our own wisdom, our own ability to discern right from wrong. Over time, this leads to spiritual weakness disguised as independence. During his lifetime, Padre Pio encountered a successful professional who hadn't attended Mass in years. The man had come seeking the saint's prayers for a business matter, but Padre Pio looked at him with deep compassion and said, "My friend, you're asking me to pray for your temporal success while your soul is experiencing spiritual famine." That conversation led to the man's return to the sacraments and a complete transformation of his relationship with God. The beauty of this pattern is that it's immediately reversible. The sacraments aren't rewards for perfect people. They're gifts for struggling people. Mary's heart doesn't require us to clean ourselves up before returning. She simply rejoices when we humble ourselves enough to accept the help that heaven offers. We now arrive at the pattern that caused Padre Pio the deepest anguish, the one that required him to spend hours in prayer before he could even discuss it. This is the pattern that strikes at the very heart of Mary's identity and mission, the subtle but devastating rejection of her spiritual motherhood. This rejection rarely takes the form of open hostility toward Mary. More often, it appears as spiritual independence that sounds almost virtuous. "I don't need Mary, I go straight to Jesus." Mary was important for her time, but now we have direct access to God. Through mystical revelation, Padre Pio was shown the moment when Jesus, dying on the cross, looked at his beloved disciple John and spoke words that would echo through eternity. "Behold your mother." But in this vision, Padre Pio understood something that shattered his heart. This wasn't merely Jesus arranging care for his physical mother. This was the establishment of Mary's spiritual motherhood over all who would call themselves his disciples. What wounds Mary's heart most deeply about this pattern is not the rejection itself, but what that rejection costs her children. When we distance ourselves from Mary's motherhood, we forfeit graces we cannot even imagine. We lose access to her maternal protection, her intercessory power, and her unique ability to form us in the image of her Son. Padre Pio witnessed how Mary's intercession works like a spiritual amplifier, taking our weak prayers and presenting them to Jesus with all the power of her maternal love. He saw how her guidance provides shortcuts to holiness that might otherwise take years to discover. Most importantly, he understood how Mary's love creates a safe space for spiritual growth that allows us to approach God with the confidence of beloved children rather than the anxiety of uncertain servants. But perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of this pattern is how it affects Jesus himself. In his visions, Padre Pio saw how every rejection of Mary's motherhood causes a corresponding sadness in the heart of her Son. What loving child doesn't feel pain when his mother is rejected? What devoted son can remain indifferent when his mother's love is spurned? The healing for this pattern begins with understanding that accepting Mary's motherhood doesn't diminish our relationship with Jesus. It perfects it. Mary never points to herself. She always points to her Son. Her greatest joy comes not from being honored, but from seeing her children grow in love for Jesus. When we embrace Mary's spiritual motherhood, we don't lose our direct access to God. We gain a mother's help in learning how to use that access more effectively. Now you understand the 5 patterns that create distance from Mary's Immaculate Heart: spiritual orphanism, degrading the temple of human dignity, casual irreverence, spiritual self-sufficiency, and rejection of her motherhood. But Padre Pio didn't reveal these patterns to burden us with guilt. He shared them because he also witnessed Mary's infinite capacity for healing and her eager desire to restore intimacy with every one of her children. The beautiful truth is that recognizing these patterns is already the beginning of healing them. Mary doesn't require perfect people. She specializes in transforming imperfect people into saints. Every small step you take toward honoring her heart creates ripples of joy that reach into the very throne room of heaven. Padre Pio offered simple but powerful practices for consoling Mary's heart: daily conversation with her through the rosary, frequent reception of the sacraments, acts of reparation for the wounds inflicted by others, and complete trust in her maternal care. But it all begins with a simple decision to include her in your daily life. Today, on this feast of her Immaculate Heart, you have an opportunity to begin a new chapter in your relationship with our Heavenly Mother. If these insights have touched your heart, if you want to become a source of consolation rather than sorrow for Mary, write in the comments, "Mary, I choose to honor your heart." Share this message with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to our channel to continue growing in understanding of Padre Pio's profound wisdom. Remember Padre Pio's promise: those who love Mary and seek to console her Immaculate Heart will find in her not just a mother, but a shortcut to the very heart of God. The choice is yours, and Mary is waiting with a mother's infinite patience for your response.